Hey bestie, welcome back to the Ride Static. My name is Isabel and I am so glad that you are here, and I'm so excited to talk about today's topic, which is of course the How to Train Your Dragon live action version. Okay, before we get started, credentials, very important. Before I share my opinions, on screen, what may or may not come up is a photo of me and my two best friends going to see How to Train Your Dragon 2 when it first aired in cinemas. What a time to be alive. I was unfortunately only 5 years old when the movie came out, the first one, and so I didn't discover it for a couple of years, but as soon as I saw it, and I loved it, it was incredible, masterpiece of cinema, best thing ever created, and that grew a little obsession in me that, you know, by the time the second movie came out, I was like, yes, this is my ish. Yeah, by the time the second movie came out, I had read all of the books, which is such a cool story, not even remotely related to the movie, to be honest, but so good. And I had watched the DreamWorks show. Then after the second movie came out, I had, as soon as Race to the Edge came out, I was all over that. That was also incredible. And then obviously the third movie, loved it, watched it all, lived it all, breathed it all, obsessed with it all. So those are my credentials. Now that's out of the way, we're going to move on to our first item of business, because trust, if this wasn't structured, we would be here for multiple hours, and that is Hiccup. I really should have written down the names of all of the actors and actresses involved in this movie. I am really sorry. We are just going to go based off the character name that they play. We're going to talk about Hiccup, and I'm pretty sure he is played by Mason Thames. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but he was incredible. He's the only actor that I remember the name of, except for Stoic. You know, I loved him as Hiccup. I think he was great. The costumes, oh my days, the costume team. Side rant, as Daz Black would say, love him. Side rant. The costumes, I was really worried that they were going to be really gimmicky and like look too costumey, but I actually really loved them. And there were so many occasions where I was sat in the theater like really impressed by Hiccup's outfits, like especially in the final battle scene. I was like, yo, the stitching is crazy, it looks so cool. Felt like the characters' relationships were not nearly as developed as they need to be, even from the beginning of the story. Like for example, Hiccup and Gobber was a really, like, that one was a bit where I was watching and I was like, I don't know about this. I'm not sure if that was to do with the, you know, like the kind of like the early days of filming kind of feel, you know, kind of like how on a TV show the pilot episode always feels way different to the rest of the series, because like that was them trying it out, seeing how it would go, seeing if it would get approved, and then the rest of the show is just like everybody's like gelled, they know this is gonna work, they know what they're there for, like, you know, they're all in for it, you know, that kind of a vibe. I wasn't sure if it was, you know, kind of the pilot episode vibes of the beginning of the film, or if it was to do with, you know, Gobber and Hiccup's chemistry. I'm not even like, I wasn't even the biggest fan of Gobber throughout the rest of the movie, but I don't know if that's just because of some of the creative choices and changes that were made, that just meant that his character didn't feel the same this time around. I'm being seriously nitpicky, by the way, like seriously nitpicky, because, you know, spoiler alert, I loved this movie. Yeah, so Hiccup himself though was really great. I really enjoyed seeing him on the screen, and seeing him come to life. I'll get into some of the things that were missing later for me, for little old me, the fanatic over here. But let's move on to talk about Astrid. Now, I know that there was a heck of a lot of controversy surrounding Astrid, surrounding the actress chosen to play her, but honestly, my honest opinion was that she was a really great shout. I think especially for what Dean DeBlois was going for this time around, she was an incredible choice. She delivered her lines really well. She had, you know, I want to say the posture of Astrid, you know what I mean? Like, you know how there's that one scene in the film where Stoic is like, when you carry this axe, you carry all of us with you. She carried Astrid. Like, it was like, Zoe Astrid was like, when you carry this axe, you carry me with you. Like, that was the vibe, and I just think she smashed it for that. Like, she was incredible. And I think there were moments where it was just potentially, like, there were moments where, here's the thing, right? I love Dean DeBlois. I trust him with this franchise because I loved the second and the third movies, which he solely directed. But there was a difference in this one, in the sense that there were definitely moments with Astrid where I felt like, there were definitely moments throughout the film where I felt like it was almost like the first take had been used. You know, where it was like people, like, you almost half expected the actors to kind of turn and be like, let me do that one again. Like, you just kind of were like, there was a different way, there was a different level of energy that this could have gone. And there were moments that I've seen pointed out online with Astrid that, you know, it was like, she could have given a little bit more in this scene. I didn't find that when I was sat there watching the movie, but I can kind of see where people were coming from upon reflection. But in the moment, I didn't think that. I feel like that potentially is just influenced by other people's opinions. I maintain that I think she was really great. The gang, let's move on to the gang, okay? The gang. Snotlout, chef's kiss, brilliant, incredible, fish legs, loved him, amazing. What happened with the twins? I'm really love to the actors. Like, this is no hate against you in any sense of the word, but what the heck happened? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. When you look at the world of Berk, like in the theme park that's in Florida, when you look at that and you look at the twins, either of the cast of the two sets, incredible. They understood the assignment. They know their Race to the Edge lore. They know their DreamWorks lore. They know their movie lore. Like, they give an incredible performance of what the twins are, which is absolute stars of the show. Like, they're incredible. Like, in Race to the Edge, they bring, like, it's such a humorous thing on its own. Like, the gang is so sarcastic and so fun, but like, the twins are such incredible characters that have depth, and, you know, they have more to them. I just was like, these twins are okay. They're just not my twins. You know what I mean? Like, they're not the twins that I grew up loving and connecting with and thinking, wow, about. You know what I mean? It just, like, there is absolutely no hate to them, and it's a change in the movie that is, you know, a good change, a bad change, that's up to you. But for me, I just think that they weren't my twins. They weren't the Berkey and the Thorsten twins that I know and love, and that was a shame to me. But I think that Snotlout and Fish Legs were really spot on, and I thought that, you know, they've changed Astrid a little bit, but she was great, and Hiccup was great as well. And so that's kind of my thoughts on the gang. Like I said with Gobber, I wasn't obsessed with him. I think he was okay. I think that potentially the creative choices meant that there was just something to be desired in how he played his character. But again, like, that idea of, it's almost like they used the first take. I feel like we could have had more from Gobber. I feel like there could have been more. You know, like, watching the live action movie, I kind of remembered how much of the training is really reliant on his energy. Like, you get this kind of, like, nervy fear from the kids and from the gang as they're kind of being like, oh my gosh, we're gonna face a Grunkle today, you know, or something like that. But it's Gobber who's driving the lore of this. Like, you have Hiccup's narration in the beginning of, this is what a Deadly Nadder is, this is what a Grunkle is, this is what a Monstrous Nightmare is, this is what a Deadly Zippleback is, Hideous Zippleback is, this is what a Night Fury is. You get that in the beginning, but it's Gobber that's, like, pushing the narrative of what these Vikings truly believe. Like, this is how you deal with it, this is how we raise our young people, effectively. There's a lot of world building that is supposed to come from his character, and like, this enthusiasm about battle, and this, you know, I don't know, I just felt like the energy and the vibe was different. Hey everybody, Editor is here. I wanted to finish this thought because I couldn't put it into words at the time, but basically, I feel like in the live action version of this movie, Gobber only ever really explored one emotion. He just was this kind of blasé teacher who was just like, come on, get the hang of it.
Whereas in the original movie, it's really apparent that, you know, he does treat what he's doing with respect. Like, obviously the Deadly Nada training scene is very much so the same, where he's just like, Hiccup, you're not focused. Get in there. And that has its place. But, like, in the Gronkle fight, you see him go from, I believe in learning on the job, to, oh my days, Hiccup is gonna die. You know, this isn't, you know, like, he has a shift in his energy where he changes emotions, he changes pace, he becomes the Viking warrior that we know him to be, and then he saves Hiccup's life, and then he kind of has this different vibe following that, where he's like, guys, you need to take this seriously, like, come on, step up. And that sets a real, you know, like, that sets a tone for, like, the danger of the training sessions. Like, Gobba's training style is bizarre. It's not like our classrooms today. You know, as Fish likes, like, this isn't a good idea. And it's just, yeah, I think that was just kind of lacking, that fluctuating emotion, rather than Gobba always being sure of himself and always being sure of the situation. When in the original, there was a greater respect for, I know these beasts, but I don't know what they're going to do in this moment. So, like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that finishes the thought a little bit more coherently.
And I missed that from him. Again, no hate to the actor. He wasn't bad. It just was different. The dragons. Everything I could have hoped for and more. Honestly, I loved them. I like, okay, the one that I maybe don't get on so well with is the Gronkle. I feel like the personality of the Gronkle has been lost a little bit, potentially. Yeah, the cartoon version is nowhere near, like, a live-action standard, whatever, but I felt like her design could have been a little bit more similar to the cartoon to make it a bit more distinctive, but that's just my opinion. I think all of them were, you know, CG'd beautifully. Everything looked really, really cool. You know, they had a great sense of presence on the screen, like, especially Stormfly. The Deadly Nada on the screen was like, wow. Her design was giving dinosaur sometimes. I've heard some people being like, oh, it's giving dinosaur a little bit. But I honestly loved it. I thought, nah, fair. And it really grew on me. I think, as silly as it sounds, I think watching Silver Willowwing, a YouTuber I've been subscribed to for as long as I can remember, she played the Roblox How to Train Your Dragon official game, and seeing the Deadly Nada, like, because you can unlock that and fly on it, seeing that flying around, that really sealed the deal for me, because I could actually see it flying. And this was an issue, this is possibly one of the only issues I actually had with, like, Ironclad. I didn't like this. All of the flying scenes are really, really epic, but like, there is, like, only one moment in the entire movie where I can remember being like, great, I finally get to have a good look at this dragon flying around. And that is right in the middle of the Battle of the Red Death, when the gang have arrived and, you know, they're kind of like coming over the horizon, and there's this shot where you can have the Gronkle here, the Monstrous Nightmare here, and, you know, and the Halo Zipper back here and Stormfly somewhere here, and they kind of, you finally get a steady shot like this, so you kind of see them flying past like that. The rest of the time, it's like hakey shaky, like you are flying a dragon to keep up with them to look at it. And I don't know if that was a choice that was made to hide CGI and to kind of help everything, you know, look a little bit more, I nearly said more live action then. But yeah, like, to look at, oh goodness, oh yeah, no, I don't know if it was to make it look a little bit smoother and make it, you know, like hide any mistakes. You know, I wish that I'd got a chance to see a good shot of them just flying, and I feel like I can't wait to see that in the second movie. I really hope that that's something that we get to see. I mean, like, can you imagine that shot of, like, entering the Bewilderbeast's cave and, you know, seeing all of those different types of dragons flying? That would, I wouldn't want that to be a hakey shaky shot. I'd want that to be smooth. I'd want to be able to really appreciate all the design and all the effort that's gone into these dragons and making them look so incredible. So that is one thing that I really do you know, without a shadow of a doubt, feel was missing from this. I feel like getting to truly appreciate the design was hard because everything was moving so fast a lot of the time. Moving on to the story. So there are a couple of things I want to talk about with this that I know has already been talked about online, but I'm very pleased to say that I noticed it on my own as well. Yeah, the first thing is, to some, potentially a very obvious thing, which is the lack of the terrible terror scene. And I bring this up as a writer who is concerned about the plot, is concerned about things making sense. So the terrible terror scene takes place directly after Test Drive, and basically Hiccup and Toothless have, you know, camped out on an island. They've got some food, you know, they're like, oof, hard day's training, gonna have a snack, love it, support it, amen. And basically these terrible terrors see Toothless's fish and like, I want me some of that, because, you know, they're kind of scavenger kind of vibes. So they're like, oh, I want some of that. And this terrible terror thinks, oh yeah, I'm a big man, I'm gonna challenge Toothless for this fish. And Toothless is just like, right, yeah, okay. And, you know, terrible terror prepares to shoot his fire, you know, so he opens his mouth, and Toothless, you know, quick as a whip, just shoots a little fireball inside his mouth. And then naturally the terrible terror is like, whoa, that was kind of crazy. And he just kind of sits next to Hiccup, and he just curls up like a little cat and is just like, I'll have some pets now. Hiccup is like, you know, wow, you're not so fireproof on the inside, are you? And he goes, everything we know about you guys is wrong, you know. And obviously it's the second line that sticks with you going into the next scene, because then, you know, it kind of informs later on the battle with the monstrous nightmare and what he's going to do, and the fact that he's like, I'm not going to kill this dragon, I'm not going to do it. And you know, that's the immediate stressor of the film, that's the more immediate stressor of the film. So you kind of, there's room to forget about that first line, which is, not so fireproof on the inside, are you? And that of course comes into play in the Red Death fight, because that's why he's like, Toothless, we're gonna hold, we're gonna turn, I'm gonna spitball fire into the Red Death's mouth, because all of the gas and everything will light and he'll explode. So without that scene, you're just kind of, it isn't quite as satisfying. She's like, well, how does Hiccup know to do that? How does he know that it's going to work to get Toothless to stay there when the tail is burning and when he's opening his mouth and he's about to get sucked in? Like, this is a lot to risk your life on with no previous experience. And also, it, you know, having that scene in there in the original, it was a callback to how everything that Hiccup knows about dragons, he knows because of his relationship with Toothless. And that was a moment with Toothless, like all of the other, you know, aspects in the training montage, you know, with the eel and the hideous sippleback, with the Gronkle and the Dragonip, which was replaced by dandelions in the live action, which I thought was kind of cute, and I didn't mind that change at all. That was really sweet. Oh yeah, and like the little scratchy thingy, the little like giving Toothless pets was like, aha, this is how I will, you know, get Stormfly to drop in front of Astrid. You know, it just was like things like that. Everything was informed. There was a reason for everything. There was a reason for every instance of a dragon, you know, having its guard lowered and, you know, becoming more on the level of the Viking in front of it. So to have the Red Death just blow up was interesting. And also, lots of people I've seen in reviews have been like, I loved seeing the Red Death's wings, like, you know, begin to tear and stuff throughout the fight. And for me, I didn't enjoy that so much, because I think it didn't make sense, because a dragon is implied to be fireproof on the outside, and, you know, throughout all of the series and all of the movies, you see Toothless getting hit with stuff on his wings all the time, and they just bounce off. And I'm not trying to say that the cartoon is obeying the laws of physics in any kind of way, but I am just saying that the fact that the Red Death was kind of coming apart so easily, that I really felt that in this movie. In the original, it feels like way more of a unit, and, you know, that terrible terror scene, that knowledge that they're not fireproof on the inside, and that you can light the gas that's in its mouth right before it blows out its fire, and that will light the whole dragon up. You know, that feels smart, that feels deserved, that feels like an actual way to defeat such a huge threat with this tiny little dragon. You know, it's just, yeah, it felt a little bit cheaper that way. I did think that the design of the Red Death was insane though. She looked incredible. Queen behavior. Yeah, so that missing scene as a writer was a bit irking to me. Adding in Snotlout's like extra story was a really interesting move for me, because he has so much depth in the series, especially like actually in both of them. In the DreamWorks series and the Race to the Edge series, there is a lot of implied emotional abuse like in his life, particularly from his father, and that's like a really interesting theme to navigate. So but like adding in that kind of need for validation from his father throughout the movie was just like a really good call for his character as a fan. I really enjoyed that, but I also just can't help but feel it didn't add tons to the story. It didn't add much I don't know what Dean Du Bois is going to do with it in the grand scheme of things, but I don't understand why Snotlout gets more added to him, but Fishlegs doesn't, and the twins definitely didn't. The twins, if anything, the twins suffered the most in order. They sat down so that Snotlout could walk. That one was interesting, and they also gave Astrid different lines in a lot of areas, and they gave her a different backstory. They gave the whole of Berk a different backstory. Actually, they kind of reverted more towards the books. Yeah, like the idea of tribes, and how one becomes part of a tribe, and the idea of Hiccup and Stoic. They are the Haddocks. They are House Haddock of the Hooligan tribe, and so Astrid, of course, was created for the movies and the series, but the idea of her being Astrid Hofferson of the Hooligan tribe, that's an interesting thing that they've added into the movie that has only really been explored even briefly in the series. This idea of last names and the relation to being in a tribe and not. But I don't know how I felt about that. There were moments where I was like, this feels a bit random. I know people have said that about that whole thing of Stoic's speech and like, what are we talking about? Why is this specific person being called out? I just saw that as like a warrior, like encouraging his troops and their key leaders in the room, I guess. I don't know. So I didn't mind that at all. But I thought that the whole thing of Astrid being like, I'm coming for your position as chief, like the idea that anybody has the opportunity to become the chief of Berk has never been implied ever before. Like even in the books, that was never an option. It was always going to be Hiccup, and that was why in the books Snotlout really hated him, because they were cousins, and he was like, I could do better than you. You are a skinny little runt. But like this idea of Astrid ever being like a real rival, like not even a rival but like an enemy, like I'm making you my enemy, was weird, and I didn't hugely love it. I think she was a bit mean in the beginning, like more so than she is mean in the movie, but I got in the original movie. I guess I asked myself, is she treating Hiccup how she treats, say, Snotlout in the series? And then I was like, yeah. So I guess then it becomes down to, do you believe that Astrid was, crushing on Hiccup from the beginning in some capacity, or had some, sort of desire to be his friend from the beginning? And, you can let me know if you think that in the comments below. Comparing the original movie to this one, I feel like that point is null and void, in a sense, because obviously they're two different films. But this was an incredibly loyal adaptation, and that has to be said. It was really, really loyal. There were only a couple of things really that were missing and a couple of things that were added. It was, like for example, The Lion King is another example of a loyal adaptation, but it lacked all of the magic. You know what I mean? Like it was the same story, but it lacked all of the magic. And they added something that was really, really cool. Like Nala's whole scene of running away from Scar. Like that was an epic add to the movie, and I loved it for that. But the rest of it, I just was like, this is so lackluster and boring. Like, you've just sucked all the magic out of it and told me the same story. With the How to Train Your Dragon live action, I didn't think that at all. I thought, wow, this is an incredible movie. I love the designs, I love the costumes, I love the world, everything looks incredible. I feel so immersed. You know, as the movie went on, it got better and better and better. Like I said, that whole, like, you know, rocky start, but incredible by the end. Yeah, the only thing that I haven't really talked about that was definitely missing from this movie and from this live action adaptation was a lot of the cartoony charm. But I even saying cartoony charm isn't exactly accurate, because it was just kind of the comedy aspects. Like, there were a couple of comedy notes that were really hit in the original movie that were just, they were really charming and they were really fun, and they communicated the character and they created a dynamic in the movie that just was lacking in the live action. The first scene that I noticed that was missing, and the one that I was most annoyed about, was Hiccup's, you know, impression of his father when Gobber is taking him back to the house in the first few minutes of the film, where he's like, I'm not going to do the impression. But that whole scene, if you haven't seen the original movie, I highly recommend you go check it out, because it's so funny, and it's just, it just shows this sarcastic side of Hiccup that is just brilliant. And this series, the whole franchise, is full of sarcasm, and it's just great. So to wrap up, I absolutely adored this movie. I think it's really great. I obviously still prefer the original, and a lot of that is to do with the nostalgia and the charm, and just like the, you know, I love the original so much. That hasn't changed. But I think this was such a cool adaptation. I was right to be, you know, cautiously optimistic. I am really, really happy with how this movie came out. However, I do have a list of demands for How to Train Your Dragon 2. Something I didn't talk about in this video was the amazingness of Gerald Butler coming back as Stoic. Stoic was brilliant. He was incredible. I wouldn't have wanted anybody else. The changes to his character and to his lines, you know, I only, like, they weren't as noticeable to me because it was the true Stoic playing them out, and so it just felt like him. It just felt like a different version of him that I haven't seen before, and that was fresh and new and exciting. So I wasn't mad about that at all. But my demand for How to Train Your Dragon 2, I want Cate Blanchett. I want her back. I need to see a live action of For the Dancing and the Dreaming with the two original cast members of those two characters, or I will cry tears. I will riot. I will do something, don't know what yet, but I need her back. Please, Cate, not that you will ever see this, watch it, perceive it, or anything. Please, I love you, come back. Yeah, no, that's literally it. That's my only demand for How to Train Your Dragon 2. Slower shots of the dragons flying, Cate Blanchett, Gerald Butler for The Dancing and the Dreaming. Amen. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I would love to hear what you thought of this movie in the comments down below. So make sure to leave a like, let me know, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Jesus loves you, and I love you too. Bye. Excuse me, barmaid. You brought me the wrong offspring. I ordered an extra large boy with beefy arms, extra guts and glory on the side. This is a talking fish bone. That's gonna go in the bloopers.